Hey everybody, welcome to Culinary Characters Unlocked. I'm David Page. On this episode, a Michelin star and James Beard award-winning chef who came up under the legendary Grant Achatz at Alinea in Chicago. These days, he's running 2 terrific restaurants of his own in Los Angeles and redefining perfection. Here's Dave Beran.
Chef, how are you? Thanks for being here.
Yeah, great. How are you? Happy to be here.
I'm good. I want to go through your life story and how you got to where you are today and your latest restaurant, but I got to start with something else that frankly I didn't realize till I started getting ready for our conversation. You trained Jeremy Allen White to play Carmy in The Bear?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I didn't help him build his character or anything. He spent about a month with us in the kitchen before they filmed the pilot.
Which kitchen?
At Pajoli.
In California with you, yeah.
Yeah. It was kind of a weird time. It was just coming out of pandemic and we're all awkwardly masked up. At that point, we were only open 5 days because we were just reopening. And so we started him on the 2 days we were closed, just working in the kitchen with myself and a sous chef, kind of building his knife skills. Then from there, by the end of it, we had him working the line during service with us.
Oh, come on, for real?
Yeah. We made him cook fish. That was great. He was solid. You know, the thing is, with any task that you do, whatever you put into it, you're going to get out of it. And he fully committed. My goal was, I don't want him to look stupid on camera, but that was all him figuring out the repetition and the skill set. For me, the majority of the conversation was more about mannerisms and mentality. His original character line, which obviously changes throughout the evolution of the show, had his timing essentially being one of my cooks at Alinea. And so with that, I think there was a lot to offer as far as this is the general feeling around what Chicago was like at that time. Because, it's not just I'm playing a chef. It's playing a chef from a time period that a lot of chefs who watched the show would have existed in. So that was pretty important.
What was the key to that time period as a chef?
Oh, Chicago in that window of time was crazy. I learned how to cook in Chicago from 2003 to, I moved away in 2016. And for me, it was that was the point in time where it wasn't just Trotter anymore.
Charlie Trotter, yeah.
Yeah. It was all these young chefs just leaving their kitchens and doing incredible things. And the magic of a great dining scene is you also have great diners. Because you can have the best restaurant in the world, but if you don't have great diners to go to, it's going to fold up. At that point in time, diners were willing to support anything. They wanted greatness. And when you have a city and diners like that, you really have an opportunity to grow and evolve. I don't know that a lot of people who weren't cooking in Chicago during that time really understand how magical it was.
And we're going to get back to that and your time at Alinea and next in just a bit. Let's talk about how you got there. You grew up in a food-centric household?
No, not really. My dad taught hotel restaurant management and he taught culinary stuff in college, but he wasn't necessarily a culinary arts professor. He just had some food labs.
This was in Chicago?
This is in upstate New York, in Syracuse.
Oh, gotcha.
And so, I'd been in and out of school restaurant kitchen scenarios, but we weren't the family that there was never a fancy meal on the table. I think Thursdays were pork chop nights.
Boy.
Pull out the Weber grill and grill fish on foil in the summers and things like that. So it was very home cooking. It wasn't fancy by any means. My parents were separated, so I spent summers in Michigan. And when I was 13 in Michigan, you're legal, used to be anyway, legal to work at 13 if you're working on a farm because it's farm labor. And there was a flea market behind my parents' house that had a diner at it, and that was considered farmland. So I could work in the restaurant at farm wages.
Did you decide to do that because of an interest in food or because it was a way to make a few bucks?
No, because my stepdad said you're going to get a job and his third cousin ran it.
Okay, that'll do.
Yeah, so it was either go detassel corn, where you ride around in the back of a pickup truck and you pull the tassels out of corn, or you work as a dishwasher at the diner. And I thought, well, there's cute girls from the school here that work there, and I'm going to go meet the girls and wash dishes. That's what I did.
And when did you start to develop an interest in more than washing dishes?
With that diner, I did it for 4 summers. And I think, the first year I was dishwasher. The second year I helped at the takeout window. The third year I was the brunch cook and made toast and short order omelets, things like that. I think I just liked the atmosphere of it. It was a fun place to work. It was all high school kids.
It's interesting. I've had an awful lot of chefs tell me that what really hit them when they first started was the camaraderie.
Yeah, I grew up playing sports. And suddenly I was in a kitchen. You got to put in your mindset like shitty Midwestern diner.
Yes.
Like there is a counter with stools at a time when you could still smoke in restaurants. And there are the fleas from the flea market sitting there smoking their cigarettes while you're making them omelets, turning around. And the cobbler was a slice of apple pie dumped into a bowl. And then you'd smash it with the edge of the plate and put ice cream on it. And that was cobbler. This was not a classy place. It was fun. It was kind of silly. But I didn't have any interest in being a chef at that point. It was just a summer job that I was good at.
By the way, just for the record, there have been some damn good Midwestern diners, including Mickey's in St. Paul, which I think is closed now.
Oh, yeah, but
I understand what you're saying about
I have a genuine love for a diner. Like upstate New York, my dad and I would always go to this place, the Beeville Diner in Baldwinsville, which I remember hockey practice at like 5 a.m. and at like 7:30, he and I would crush blueberry pancakes. The best. So diners are probably like the pinnacle for me of that nostalgic place.
And the number of diners keeps eroding.
Cooks with egos don't want to work in them anymore. But anyway, so I went off to college. I studied business psych and philosophy, but my goal was just to play hockey. Really, the culinary spark happened. My dad used to always go to the restaurant show in Chicago every year. For me, as a little kid, like my dad would go away and a week later he'd come back and he'd have all these stories of Chicago and he'd bring me back whatever nonsense trinkets that were like free gifts there. But I always thought it was cool. One year between my sophomore and junior year of college, he asked if I had any plans that summer. And I went to college in Chicago, so I was already there. And I said no. So he picked me up and took me to the restaurant show. And it was like the year of the smoothie. So I think I had like 900 smoothies that year. But every night they'd go to a nice dinner. And one of the nights he took me to, like we did Topolobambo one night, which is Bayless's fine dining Mexican restaurant. Regretfully, he went to Trotter's and I said, oh, I don't need to go to that. Should have. But I did go to MK, and MK was like this mind-blowing experience where the food was cool and delicious and the space was like, I felt like I was somewhere really special.
And you would end up working there later in your...
Yeah, that was my first real job. After we finished the restaurant show, he was like, I don't know if you have plans this summer. We just found out that your grandma, his mom, had cancer, had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And he asked if I'd go and like help kind of take care of her while he and my uncle were taking care of the affairs. And so I went and spent the summer with her, and she passed away. It was kind of inevitable.
Sorry.
But the silver lining of it is we all went out to lunch there when I first got there. This is in Indian River, Michigan, way up north in lower Michigan. But we went to Petoskey, this small town in Michigan, and there was this restaurant called Latitude that we ate at. And it was awesome. The group that owned it owned Tribute in Detroit, which had won a couple James Beards. It was a really good restaurant. And so we had a great lunch, and I happened to be talking to the bartender, kind of like fluffing up this idea that I wanted to be a chef and ate at these cool restaurants. And they needed a lunch guy. So they hired me, and I got a job cooking there that summer.
With no culinary training?
No, I really kind of bullshitted my way into that job. I was like, oh, my dad's a professor and I spend time in kitchens with him and blah, blah, blah. And that was the window of time where they could hire you and say, we'll give you 2 weeks. And if you suck, that's it. And they said that. And frankly, I didn't have any idea what I was doing, but they just needed someone to mix salads and take direction. And I could do that just from working at the diner. So I was fine with it. But by the end of it, I was learning how to make the ossobuco and learning how to clean crab. And it was very cool. And again, that sense of community there. And so, like, I still talk to the guy who was my sous chef there back, this is 25 years ago. And I still talk to Randall every now and then. That sparked the moment where I was like, after college, I'm going to go to culinary school and I'm going to do this and really love it. And then I didn't go to culinary school because I couldn't afford it.
So what'd you do? And by the way, what college were you going to?
Lake Forest College, small private school north of Chicago.
Okay, so you graduate?
Yeah, so I graduated and I did what every college student does when they don't know what they're going to do. I moved downtown Chicago and I lived in an apartment above a bar. I was above the original Pops for Champagne.
Lovely.
And so I had no job and no money, and the bartenders were really cool. So I'd walk downstairs and sit at the bar right when they opened, and they'd give me leftover staff meal. And there were always like these ballers who'd walk in, who'd order like 6 bottles of champagne and they'd never finish them. And so I'd sit there, and on any given day, I'd have like a bottle of Krug in front of me or a bottle of Dom that they hadn't finished. And they'd be like, here, drink the rest of this. And so that was my first opening moment to champagne. It's probably why I love champagne so much. But yeah, so I lived downtown. I kept applying at different restaurants and not getting any jobs. And, because I had no experience.
So who hired you?
MK. I happened to walk into MK with a resume, and the chef, Stephen Dunn, he was a chef de cuisine at the time, sat down with me and he's like, you don't have any experience, but we just had a guy quit. And he's like, I didn't go to culinary school either. So we'll give you 2 weeks and we'll see how you do. And they put me on the Pomme Frites station where I made fancy French fries and helped this guy, Gus. I was like the meat assist. So I basically put vegetables on trays under the salamander and made sure they were hot. That was it. My first 6 months were an absolute disaster. I was typical, like just out of college. All my friends were athletes. athletes and all the guys in the industry were partying too much. And so I was going out drinking every night. Then one day I had this like eye-opening moment and I was like, what am I doing? So my roommates and I signed up for a half marathon and decided to pull our lives together. And from that point on at the restaurant, I started doing really well. And yeah, it kind of changed everything. So I was at MK for a year and a half.
And is that where you really learned to cook?
That's where I learned efficiency. That's where I think I realized that a line and playing a team sport were very similar. And as soon as I was able to draw that correlation, I became much more successful in that kitchen. And of course, stopped drinking till 5 a.m.
Well, that doesn't hurt.
Yeah, a 22-year-old can do that, but 23, no more,
And we'll be right back.
I had kind of a pivotal moment at MK where I was offered an opportunity to move up and become a junior sous chef. I didn't think I was done learning. And in my head, when you're a manager, you're the teacher, not the student. As I know now, you're always the student. But it just felt like time. It felt like time to move on.
And from there, you went to True?
Yeah, every aspect of my life has always been, if there's a better version, that's the version I want.
Okay, I'm unfamiliar with True, and I'm embarrassed by that because I'm guessing I should know it.
True had moments of greatness. When I applied to True and Trotter. True was Rick Tramato. And at the time, the Tribune had done this like 10-point comparison of True versus Trotter for best in the city. And that year, True won.
What kind of food?
French tasting menu. The Chef de Cuisine was from Ducasse. So I applied to both. I got a job at True, and it was like mind-blowing. Everything I'd learned at MK about speed and efficiency, it became now this is refinement. This is how you actually cook a piece of meat. I learned Ducasse-style sauce work. The butcher had worked at French Laundry, so I learned proper fine dining butchery. The restaurant was incredible. Like if you sat as an 8-top, it was very classic French. You'd do the Amuse series, and then you'd go to Cold Garmager by Hot Garmager, so on and so forth. And there was always like the offal, the bird, the meat. So if we sat down together as an 8-top and the fish course came out, every person had a different type of fish with a different presentation. They could do that up to 8. And that came from, I believe, Danielle Ballud consulted on the restaurant. So it was based off of how Danielle wrote his menus. So it was incredible. I was there for a year and same thing happened. It was, move up and potentially be a sous chef or move on. And the Chef de Cuisine, Joel, sat me down and was like, look, I'm going to be leaving soon. And we talked a lot about his time with Ducasse and what I should do next. And I really wanted that refinement. Like by the end of my time there, I was saying, okay, if you were at Ducasse, how would you do this? And if you were at Ducasse, how would you do this? I don't remember a lot of the dishes we served there. I just remember the techniques that I learned. Anyway, so he suggested that I go to either Robuchon or French Laundry. That was when Robuchon had 3 stars in Vegas. And so I applied to both and I had stages set up. And then one late night, I was out with the staff and this woman that I worked with, Kim, one of the best cooks I've ever worked with, her boyfriend was a cook at Alinea, which is less than a year old at that point, but where I'd always wanted to work. I tried working for Achatz at Trio. I was just in awe of what he was doing.
Yeah, the chef Grant Achatz, who Alinea was just amazing molecular.
I mean, when Alinea opened, there was nothing like it, at least not in the US. Even at Trio, what he was doing, I was just so in awe of it. I had no way to get in. And she looks at me that night and it's like 1:30 in the morning. We're at the bar after work. And she goes, if you're ever going to apply to Alinea, apply tonight. Dan, her boyfriend, is putting in his notice and we're leaving to go to El Bulli.
Ferran Adria's restaurant in Spain, which at one time was named #1 in the world.
And then I went home and wrote a resume and cover letter and probably, 3:30, 4 in the morning, I emailed it.
After a night of drinking, those are always the best letters.
I don't really remember much of that. I know I did it. And I know I got a call at 10 a.m. the next morning offering a tryout.
The next morning.
Yeah, it sounded like a small child on the phone. It was Achatz. He was, I think 32 at the time. He just always sounded young. So I took a tryout there, was offered a job after a 1-day stage and canceled French Laundry and Robuchon and worked at Alinea.
You became Chef de Cuisine there eventually.
Yeah. So at Alinea, there was a brilliant move, which I don't think you could pull off today because just labor is different. But at Alinea, all cooks started as food runners. And that was the waiting line for the kitchen because they had so many people who wanted jobs there. So they could literally pick and choose whoever they want. And they could build a staff of 8 food runners who were just cooks waiting. And now every restaurant you talk to, they're like, oh, we could take 1 or 2 more cooks, but there's no one out there.
One of the finest meals I've ever had was at Alinea. What did that do for you as a chef? Obviously, you were good enough to go there, but what'd you learn?
It changed my perspective on everything. It was like every rule that you knew was thrown away as far as like the French progression. I mean, we had a dessert mid-menu. And that to me at the time was crazy, but it was so logical when I ate there. I think what it brought to the table was this notion that as long as you can justify it, anything can be anything. The only real rule was everything had to taste good. Everything had to be delicious. I remember when Chef was making like this cauliflower custard, he wanted these little cubes of cauliflower custard and each one coated in a different flavor. And then the 5 of them would go on the plate. We'd pour a sauce tableside. It started with making French Laundry's cauliflower velouté. And then we made it into the custard. And I remember one of our cooks staging somewhere else that also had a cauliflower custard. And like, oh yeah, they just blanch it and puree it and then add some powders to it. And that really became that analogy for what Alinea was. Until it's perfect and grounded in foundation, you can't make it something else. So everything was just so like, did you taste this? Is it perfect? Is it right? Why are we doing this? What is the purpose of this? Nothing could ever be because it was cool. Things change and evolve, but that window of time for me, that first couple years, I mean, I look back at the line and it was John Shields and Greg Backstrom and Ryan Bartlow was on that line, Jordan Kahn and Alex Stupak. You just start naming like chef F. Curtis Duffy was there. That kitchen was full of chefs who at any point right now, you could position them into being one of the best chefs in the country.
It was a murderer's row.
It was insane. Everyone has become something who worked in that kitchen, and it was just so much talent.
Let me take a brief diversion here while we're talking about Alinea. It just lost its 3rd Michelin star.
Yeah.
Does that matter?
Depends on who you ask. For ego, sometimes, sure. For me, it's hard to see because I know what that restaurant is and what it's capable of. And I don't think I've ever thought of that restaurant as anything less than that. I can't even imagine it as being that. The thing about Michelin as a whole is you are taking a test that you don't know you're taking. You don't know when you're taking it. You don't know what's on the test. You're not given feedback. It's just one day a grade comes out and you don't know when that grade is from or who it was or how it happened or what it is. It's just a thing. And, you know, some days lightning strikes and maybe a server slipped and dropped something in the dining room. You don't know. I've lost a star. We lost a star at Pas Jolie. Is it a worse restaurant? No, it's not. In fact, when you get a star, you are graded on what you've done, not what you're going to do or not what you're currently doing. You're thought about from what you did potentially a year, even 2 years ago. Does it matter? It always matters. But does it really matter in the big picture of that? Like that restaurant is doing 130 covers 7 nights a week, executing at such a caliber. Frankly, should that restaurant be on North America's top 50 or world top 50? Yes, it should be. But the thing is, when you're a 20-year-old restaurant, the conversation isn't who's the best, it's who's the most relevant in the moment, right? Or who's the coolest. If you are a person who's considering going to Alinea, I would say that over the next 6 months to a year, there probably hasn't been a better time to go than now.
Because chef needs to prove something.
Well, that, and, you know, he's been gone for the last 5 months doing the 20th anniversary pop-ups. They were in Tokyo for a month. They were in Miami, New York, LA. He's about to open part of that 20th anniversary in Montana. But you better believe when he's standing in that kitchen, it's going to be the best that restaurant's ever run because that's just him. And it's not about proving something. I've never stood next to anyone with as much drive as he has. There's not an off switch. Like I would say the drive that he has in the kitchen is probably what kept him alive through cancer.
As I understand it, they wanted to operate in a way that would have taken away his sense of taste. It was tongue cancer, I think.
It was going to take away most of his face.
Yeah, and he said no way and did something else and beat it.
Yeah, it worked backwards. It's supposed to be surgery, then radiation. And the progressive treatment that they did reversed it. And so it needed very minimal surgery.
Okay, working for him after Alinea, you opened Next.
Yeah.
Also, one of his restaurants as executive chef. You got a James Beard Award?
Yeah, I got a couple of them. In our opening year, I lost Rising Star, but we won Best New Restaurant. And then 2 years later, I won Best Chef Great Lakes and Food and Wine Best New Chef and I don't know, a bunch of other ones.
How did this differ from Alinea? What was the mission here?
Next was actually born of this weird moment between Achatz and Kokonis.
Nick Kokonis being his business partner.
Yeah, his former business partner. Nick had come over to talk to Chef about something and he was hungry and Achatz like just, you know, we had some duck breast and we had some sauce.
Yeah, just lying around.
Yeah, just like some stuff. He cooked them like duck with morels and duck jus. And Nick ate it and was like, this is so good. Why don't we do a restaurant with this? And Achatz like, because we'd get bored. And then, you know, same scenario happens and we have something else laying around. I think we had like tagliatelle from our white truffle pasta that we did every fall. And Achatz made him just like a pasta course. And he's like, why don't we do an Italian restaurant like this? And again, the response is because we get bored. And so thus the concept of Next is born.
You kept changing the menu to different regional cuisines. Was that it?
Yeah.
Coming right back.
Nick wanted to create a ticket system for restaurants for reservations. And in turn, we needed a concept that would stay interesting, but also allow for the sales of tickets. And so if you look at a big picture, you say, well, theater is a stage or a set, but the content within it changes seasonally. And so you sell seasonal tickets. The restaurant equivalent of that is to have a restaurant that's designed to be unique enough, but generic enough that anything can fill it. It's a stage set. And so with that, what we did is we filled it with different concepts. Paris 1906, Tour of Thailand. We did an El Bulli retrospective. We did a series that was based off of the idea of the hunt. We did a vegan menu. We did kaiseki. We did a kaiseki tasting menu. And so the idea was the restaurant was always changing. And so we sold season tickets for it. You would come in and it was wild. Like the plateware would change, the food would change. The only thing that didn't change was essentially the stage set. And even now, as it's evolved a lot, my understanding is they do start to change the dining room a bit now. But in our window of time, it was like the tabletop, that was the experience. And so whatever changed happened on the table.
The ticket thing, I would buy a ticket for a certain number of meals over the course of a year.
Yeah, so think of it like this. Because it was 3 menus a year, what if you could sell at a discount all 3 dinners over a year? At one point, I think it was like 70% of our sales were season tickets. So by the end of like January, when all the tickets were sold, you had 70% of your revenue in. It was very cool. As a chef, you start to know what your budget is. So you can say like, okay, it's sold out and it's sold at this price, so I can spend this much. And you'd back into a menu that filled that.
But it wasn't yours. You decided you wanted a place your own. Didn't you try to partner up with Chef Achatz?
Yeah, I had a pretty eye-opening moment at Next. Achatz gave me a lot of freedom there. And with every menu, I got more and more freedom to the point where when I did the progression of hunt, vegan, and kaiseki, those were entirely mine. Other than tasting the food and giving me the green light, he didn't really have any input on those menus at all. And then we went into the steakhouse menu. Nick Achatz really wanted a 4-course steakhouse menu with the choice of fish or meat for the entree as the 4th course. And I, coming off of these big successful tasting menus at Next, fought him. And I was like, no, this needs to be our template of our 16-course menu. And I have ideas for this and this. And he's like, but that's not a steakhouse. And I was like, but that's not Next. And he and I fought a ton about it. It would end up being like an 8-course menu with a couple choices. And, you know, the compromise means no one's ever happy. And it wasn't as good as I wanted it. And it wasn't what he wanted. And frankly, you know, in hindsight, Nick was right. The point of that restaurant was that it always needed to change and needed to be something different. And the curse of being a chef who's learning their voice is you're trying to find consistency. That was that eye-opening moment where I realized that my growth as an individual was going to become detrimental to a restaurant designed to constantly change. The success of that menu should have been the version Nick proposed. Instead, I had just fought for my own identity and ego within that restaurant. I think I still did 6 or 7 menus after that, but that's when I started really trying to understand what my concept and my philosophy was. Ultimately, I'd spent about 1.5 to 2 years putting together this deck for the restaurant concept that I wanted. And I'd been doing like talking to brokers in New York and San Francisco because I knew I wanted to be coastal and really kind of looking at where I wanted this restaurant to be and understanding the business model with this idea to basically hand them a closed package and say, would you guys be interested in partnering with me on this?
Nick and Chef Achatz.
Yeah. The gift and curse of the industry is that it's small. They started getting wind of me like shopping for real estate and doing things behind their back. I had talked to our CFO about business model and stuff, and he knew exactly what I was doing, so he wasn't worried about it. But obviously, like, they hear me bopping around and they're like, what are you doing? So Achatz sat me down one day and was like, look, I know you're looking around. I know you're looking to leave. When are you done? And I was like, well, this is what I've been doing. And I just wanted to show you a finished concept so you knew I was serious, but I had to do the research first. And so they sat with it, and Nick sat me down and offered me a partnership opportunity. Achatz and I talked about it a lot. And at the end of the day, he said this thing to me. He was like, when I was leaving French Laundry, Thomas said that if I ever wanted my own name on the door, he couldn't partner with me because it would always be a Thomas Keller restaurant. And he said, the truth is, if I partner with Achatz, it will always be a Grant Achatz restaurant with Dave Beran running it. And he never said he didn't want to partner with me or that he wouldn't. He just kind of posed that idea to me. And then over time, as I continued to talk to them and kind of look at it, just the paths weren't lining up. They were focused on a lot of new stuff they were doing in Chicago, and I wanted to leave Chicago.
For the West Coast.
Yeah. So ultimately we parted ways and I moved to LA.
Where you opened Dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
which was kind of groundbreaking.
That was a cool, weird little restaurant. Yeah.
It was in a food court?
Yeah. So I moved here and I actually had an apartment above the restaurant space I wanted, which was downtown. It was an old bank space. We negotiated that lease for 9 months before we realized that the landlords were just kind of dragging us along and never actually had intention of renting it. And it still sits vacant. It's been 11 years now. But after 9 months, I had this whole freak out and was like, I'm done with this. I needed a job. Wolfgang Puck was looking for a chef consultant kind of scenario for his R&D kitchen. So I worked with Wolfgang for 6 months. In that interim of time, a friend of my business partners, he's a real estate developer, was developing a food court on the promenade in Santa Monica and was like, hey, we have this idea for the upstairs to be all well-known chefs doing kind of cool casual concepts. They had the Voltaggio brothers doing a fried fish place. They were talking to, who else? Ray Garcia, who had broken Spanish, about doing a BS taqueria. They had Dave Chang's, was it Fuku, I think was his casual concept. They had that in there. But we were the first ones they talked to. And I looked at it, I was like, I cannot have my first LA restaurant be a sandwich shop. And so I said no 3 times. And finally I went to the space and I looked at it and I was like, if we sealed this off and made a secret room, it'd kind of be like when you're in Japan and you go the 6th floor of a business office and suite 231 is actually a bar. I was like, what if we did that like an izakaya style restaurant, but it wasn't Japanese?
What was the food?
Me figuring out what the hell I wanted to cook.
It was a tasting menu, right?
Yeah. It was always 18 to 22 courses. It changed 4 times a year. The goal with it was understanding my voice and no longer having the parameters of Next or Alinea. There were only 4 of us in the kitchen. We opened 5 days. We did about 30 covers a night. It was awesome.
You got a Michelin star, right?
We did. Yeah. Weirdly, we got Forbes 5-star and a Michelin star with no bathrooms, no host stand. It was crazy. And so, that restaurant ran its course pretty quickly. A year in, we'd outgrown it. We had moved into the garage downstairs in the basement of the building, and we had fridges all over the place. And so when pandemic hit and they started allowing reopening again, we looked at it and we realized that we could only have 1 table at a time in there. So either 2 or 4 guests at a time, twice a night. And it was a failing business model at that point. We couldn't keep it open. The building was being sold. They gave us an opportunity to just get out of our lease clean. And so we did. We had Pajoli at that point.
You had it or you were going to open it?
Pajoli opened the September before pandemic.
Okay.
We found the Pajoli space while looking for a new dialogue space.
So dialogue closes, you've got Pajoli, which also got you a Michelin star. What I read is it's described as an elevated French bistro.
Yeah. Pajoli is probably on its 3rd life right now. When we opened it, it was the bistro that I wanted it to be from the chef perspective.
Serving what?
We still have duck press was our big thing. The press duck, roll the cart up to the table. But I saw it as very classic high-end bistro food, like Benoit, Ayard, high-end Parisian bistros. And it was very good up until pandemic. And then as we reopened from pandemic, labor models change and, a lot of things changed. Our service team was a 1/3 smaller. So we started putting the bottle of water on the table instead of us pouring the water. The menu had to be smaller and food costs were different.
You've gotten more casual.
What we ultimately did, it slowly veered more casual. We went prefix for a little bit. That didn't really work out. Last June, we reconcepted and made it just a casual neighborhood bistro. Better bar setup, just not intimidating. It became a place where people were going for birthdays and anniversaries. And I always wanted to be the place that if you and I are walking down the street, we wouldn't be afraid to drop in for a cocktail.
Well, but that's so Parisian because my experience, I was lucky enough to work overseas for quite a while, is that so many of the best restaurants in Europe are places you just stumble into walking down the street.
Yeah. And it took me a long time. In fact, it frankly took opening Celine to be able to walk in and look at Pajoli and be like, this isn't what it's supposed to be. And I needed to have a Chef de Cuisine back in there and remove myself a little bit from it in order to see it with fresh enough eyes to say we're doing it wrong. And before the world realizes we're doing it wrong and stops coming in, we need to change it. And so we did.
Was part of that, and we're going to get to Celine in just a second, which is certainly fine dining. But as the restaurant industry goes through all sorts of trouble, not that it has ever not gone through trouble, there are those who say fine dining is dead. Was the economy part of your sense that it was time to change?
Coming out of it, yes. Oddly, the decision to change Pas Joli was very personal. So we live in the neighborhood, my wife and I and our kids, and my daughter's 3, and she and I would always go to like a little Mexican place next door to Pas Joli. And on Mondays, that place is closed, and we were walking down the street. And so we stopped into Pas Joli on a Monday at like 5:30. It was early on a Monday, so there were only 2 tables seated, and both of them were like there celebrating something. And there were a couple people at the bar. And I looked at the menu and I looked around the restaurant, and I was sitting with my daughter, and I thought, I don't know how this became what it is, but it's not what I want it to be. And that was it. There's restaurants I want to cook at, and there's restaurants I want to eat at. They're not always, in fact, more often than not, they're not the same restaurant. And so I looked at Pas Joli, which is a restaurant that I loved cooking at, and sitting there as a diner with my 3-year-old, trying to figure out what to get her to snack on while I sat at the bar, it didn't feel right. It didn't feel like that place that in my head it was. It was just this really eye-opening experience where you see something with fresh eyes from a different perspective than you've always known it. And I sat on that idea for a month or so before talking to my business partners about it. And I was like, you know what? It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel how I want it to feel in my head.
Now that you've made changes, now that you've made it more casual, does it feel better?
Yeah, it feels great. We'll say on a Saturday, if we used to have 85 reservations, we might do 92 people because we get a couple walk-ins at the bar and that's it. Now on a Saturday, we'll go into a Saturday with like 70 reservations and we'll do 150.
Well, the public likes it then.
And that to me is the success of the restaurant now. It's not necessarily that we're doing that many more covers. It's that many more people aren't afraid to walk in. And when we're only getting like 7 or 8 people on a Saturday who are walking in off the street, that tells me that people were afraid to go there, right? It just tells me that it's too intimidating. And that's not what it was supposed to be. So yeah, the economy though, as you asked, does play a part. Like we have the strikes, we have the fires. Every year there's some hand of God moment in LA where it like shakes up everything and you wonder if you're going to make it through.
So of course, you've gone and opened a new upscale tasting menu restaurant called Celine.
Yeah. This is the evolution of dialogue.
Well, the Infatuation just named it one of the top 3 best restaurants in LA.
Which is good because they ate there like the 3rd night we were open. And then the day that we launched our autumn menu, I never have good timing. No, it's great. We opened that restaurant and a month later, the fires happened in LA and we've been pretty under the radar there, which is unfortunate. But restaurants open one of 2 ways, right? They either open as like this complete closed vision of this is perfect and it's what it will be and the food might change, but the concept is. And then the flip side is restaurants will open as these living, breathing things, right? And they go from being a newborn to an infant to a toddler. And Celine is very much that. It's a restaurant that when it opened, I knew what I didn't want it to be, but I wanted to kind of see what it was going to become. And it's taken a while to understand it, but I think now it's certainly the best it's been. And there's a very clear path and understanding to what it will be.
One article says, after years inside some of the world's most precise kitchens, the former Alinea chef is letting go of perfection and finding something deeper in the process. At Alinea, the goal was to wow. At Celine, the goal is to connect. Accurate or just flowery?
Pretty accurate. I mean, here's the thing. Perfection is always the thing, right? But the part of that quote that is picked up later in the article is, I wanted to understand perfection from a different view. I didn't want perfection to be my square is a perfect square. I think that quote was referring to the salad that we had on the menu. And the idea is that we are merely taking the things around us and finding that perfect moment with them. And for so long, I was taking whatever product and making it into my perfect thing. And now we have, in Southern California, like it just rained all week, sorrel's growing everywhere. And there's going to be a moment where the right patch of sorrel at the right size is going to be phenomenal. And so what I wanted to do was at least have 1 or 2 courses that we are merely finding moments of perfection and handing them off. We are not the ones fighting to make it perfect.
Okay, give me some examples.
There's a garden by my apartment that we work with. Every morning, myself and at least one of the cooks would go and we'd always pick 7 or 8 herbs from the garden, and that would be the salad. And the idea was there's probably 30 different things growing there. Every day the salad changes, but the idea is all the nasturtium are the right size today. So we're picking all the nasturtium today for it. Embracing that moment where nature presents itself as perfect, not us manipulating it. We're not ring punching everything into a perfect size. And so that's where that notion started. And then the next one, currently on our menu, unrelated to nature, we have an apple cider cider donut because it's an autumn menu. And I think when you talk about things like a donut, for example, at a restaurant, when you go to a fine dining restaurant and you hear that they're serving a donut, you imagine the most perfect, picturesque thing. Like French Laundry's coffee and donuts, for example. Those donuts are aesthetically perfect. But for me, talking to my Chef de Cuisine, the perfect donut for an apple cider donut is the one where it's like the leaves are falling and it's crisp outside and things are crunching and you walk into, the barn after picking apples and there's someone with their turkey fryer, but instead they're frying donuts going like this and dropping them in the oil and they break and kind of explode a little bit. And that makes the edges really crispy because of the way they naturally burst. And so perfection in that moment for me was about the nostalgic moment, not the aesthetic moment.
I get the sense that you demand that there be some kind of story or connection to whatever you're making here. Is that correct?
Now, yes. Yeah. I mean, when we opened Celine, like if you go right down to the name of it, it's named after my daughter.
Whose name is not Celine, so you need to explain.
My daughter's name is Harvest Moon. She's named after the song, but Celine is a girl's name in Latin, meaning heaven or moon. I wanted to play into the notion of the childlike wonder, where as a child, you don't have these preconceived notions of I can, I can't, this is, this isn't. Things are exactly as you perceive them within that moment. No one's ever told you otherwise. There were days I'd walk down the street with her and we'd look up at an airplane flying over and she would stop for like 2 minutes because she was just in awe of this thing. And so everything we've done at the restaurant has been kind of embracing that notion that there's magic in the mystery and to stop thinking about things as you've known them and just kind of take them at face value for what they are and embrace the fact that things can be different. Like our coffee and caviar is caviar with coffee anglaise and hazelnuts. It's
With what? Huh? Who?
We have this caviar dish at the restaurant, and the whole idea was to look at caviar not as a luxury ingredient that you have to covet, but as a texture and a flavor.
So what's it served with?
Coffee anglaise. Think of like melted ice cream. So basically one day I was tasting caviar and I was drinking a Dunkin' Donuts French vanilla coffee. I was like, these taste good together. And so we created this dish that's become kind of a signature of the restaurant. It was originally created dialogue. And it's the whole notion that when you have that moment where you're allowing yourself to have the connections that people haven't told you can't, it frees you up a lot.
Okay, what's the story behind venison tartare? Is there a lot of call for raw deer out there?
No. There's a couple things. One, my Chef de Cuisine, he worked at Willow's Inn for a long time. So he does really wonderful things with like root vegetables. I don't know why they did so much with root vegetables there, but they did. He presented me with celery root that was slow roasted in salt dough for several hours. He shaved it really thin and had this great texture and great flavor. And I kept associating it with flavors of coffee and flavors of cherry, thinking of those brown spice things, like wintry preserved things. I wanted it to have some like depth and kind of earthiness. So originally we tried it as a beef tartare. And as soon as we did it as a beef tartare, I was looking back through some of my favorite things from my time at Alinea, and there was a point where we did a cube of venison inside of a savory granola. And then we baked it so it looked like a little granola hockey puck with venison in it. It had a celery root puree and a cherry sauce. And all of a sudden, that imprint of those flavors together made sense. I was like, this needs to be a venison dish. This shouldn't be a beef dish. Like it needs that irony kind of gaminess to it, and it needs to be leaner. So we started thinking more about winter and grains and seeds and preservation, and it led to a venison and celery tartare. And people really clung to that dish, which surprised me. And one of the things that we've tried doing at the restaurant is when a concept works, I want to evolve it. But next, it was every 3-4 months, everything went away and we started over. At Dialogue, I did the same thing. And at Alinea, once a dish went on the menu, it was just kind of done. We'd done so much R&D before it that when it was on the menu, that was the finished version of it. Here, I looked at it and I saw this beef dish become this venison dish. And I thought, okay, well, where is the success and where is the failure? How do we evolve this into a bigger concept? One of the things was I wanted to add a fruit element to it with the cherries, but I didn't want to put cherries in the dish because when they're in the dish, it's too sweet. So my father-in-law is a hunter and has some farmland, and every spring he walks the farmland and he finds deer antlers that are naturally shed in autumn. I reached out and asked if he had any antlers, and he sent me a box of antlers, and we thought, okay, well, let's create the visual with the venison. So we made a cherry bite to serve on an antler before that, and that kind of evolved it. I wanted closure to the dish, so now we take all of the celery root scrap and we make a celery root ice cream. So now we have closure to the dish as well, where you get the bite on the antler, then you get the venison, and then you get the celery root ice cream afterwards to kind of build this whole concept around a progression of venison and celery root.
This is a dumb question. Is celery root the same as celery?
The short answer is yes. The long answer is no. The way that I understand it with different varieties, the celery you get at the grocery store is not the same as the celery root we're getting, but they're in the same family. I love celery root. I don't like celery. Similar flavor, but different. Good celery root's very delicate, but you can do a lot with it.
I don't know a polite way to ask this. You're getting all these rave reviews. Are you making any money?
No, of course not. The challenge has been all the hurdles in LA. Every time you take 2 steps forward, you end up taking a step back, whether it's been the fires, the protests, the strikes. LA has been a roller coaster of love and hate. It gives you a big hug and then it pushes you away and then it gives you a big hug again.
Well, can you keep a restaurant like this open?
We'll see. I hope so. We're going to keep pushing, and I'm really fortunate that we have great investors and great partners in it, and especially with Celine, the landlord's incredible. Considering we've had almost no press at Celine and our covers are increasing weekly, I'm very optimistic about the restaurant and the future of it and the evolution of it. It's not often that you look at something you're doing and you say every day it's better than it was the previous day. With Dialogue, with Pas Jolie, we'd have those moments where I'd look at it, and especially in hindsight, I'd look at it and be like, we regressed a little bit for that menu, or maybe that wasn't quite good enough, or I see the weaknesses in this. With Celine, everything we've done to this point is better than everything we'd done previously. That's that point where even when I run into people who are like, I ate there back in February and it was really cool. I'm like, come back. It's a different restaurant. It's a better restaurant. The way the team has evolved, the way the concept has evolved, the clarity of vision. Last summer, Grant Achatz's wife, Sam, she's like a branding wizard. After Michelin came out and we didn't get a star at Celine, I had this whole heart to heart with her about what am I doing and what happened. And she was like, well, let's back up. Forget about that, because you get all on your feelings and whatever else. And I knew we were a good restaurant, but I think the thing that I hadn't quite understood yet was what's our voice? So she sat with me for a while and she was like, describe your restaurant in a sentence. What is it? And she went through and she's like, Alinea is theater on a plate. We went restaurant by restaurant by restaurant. And then she goes, Celine is. And I was like, well, it's kind of, and it's this, and my food's hard to explain. It's an experience thing. And she goes, well, you don't know what your food is. And she was right. And so I spent the summer basically reading everything. We'll exclude Yelp and reviews like that, but everything significant that had been written about me since my time at Alinea. If you think about it like a nickname, right? You can't give yourself a nickname. You can't be like, I'm the general. Someone has to give you a nickname. And the same can be true a bit with identity, where someone else who doesn't know you can more easily quantify what it is. They can articulate it because they have that snapshot. And so in all this writing, I came across a piece that Bill Addison had written about Dialogue when it first opened, and he said it's where seasonality meets surrealism. I dove into this notion of what surrealism was, and separate from a Dali painting, it was more this idea of where reality and the dream world overlap. And the conflict in my food and in my restaurant and personality and everything was always this idea that I wanted things that didn't exist to coexist. I want a concrete loft in the middle of a forest. I want an escoffier dish sitting next to something that floats. And I could never quantify why, other than saying my own personal experiences are just too broad. And coming across that quote, it triggered something where it was like, that's the point of it. That's not the conflict in it. And to quantify in a sentence changed everything for Celine.
So what's the sentence that defines Celine today?
It's where seasonality meets surrealism. It's a focus on seasonality, but it's a focus through my perspective. It's not like this is autumn in California. Now this is winter in California. This is my perception, and it's going to be a caricature of what it actually is. It is going to be an exaggerated version through my lens, and it is going to be things that you don't expect. This menu opens with guests sit down and there's a poem on the table. And each line in the poem is a title of the section of the menu, and it goes through 3 sections on 3 perspectives of autumn. It's very much gone from not being a storytelling restaurant, which it probably should have been initially, to now having a very clear and distinct story.
And experiencing substantial success.
Yeah.
Getting noticed. Chef, congratulations on all the success.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. I very much appreciate it.
Of course. It's a real pleasure.
Dave Beran on Culinary Characters Unlocked. I'm David Page. I'll see you next time. And check out the Culinary Characters Unlocked Substack.